An Empire of Ice and Fire by Longclaw 1-6. Chapter 20. To the south and to the north. A vast grassland, from horizon to the bottom of the battlements. It seemed familiar to Dany, but also different. Unlike the vibrant green or golden tan of the high stalks that carpeted the lands of the great grass sea, this was a more muted grass, drab, yet no less alive. Eyes gazing about, a serene comfort cloaked Daenerys, as if she was home. She had never once seen this land, never once graced the unfamiliar battlements and walls of a rather functional castle, yet there was a familiarity that she couldn't place. Suddenly it came to her, an image from a time long before, of both happiness and sorrow. Winterfell! Aye, welcome back, my queen. Startled, swiveling her head around, Dany was taken aback at the sight of Lord Eddard Stark, a small smile on his lips and a calm expression on his face. He was dead, so this couldn't be real. Glad to see you as the dragon you always were. Biting her lip, Dany felt a surge of happiness at his pride in her. The two of them trained their eyes downward, at the courtyard. A group of boys were milling about, wrestling together. My brothers and I, as thick as thieves. Ned laughed. Dany felt a longing, a tug deep down inside of her. With her childhood on the run and the nature of her brother, she had never had the image of family. Harmony. Never really had a family. But at least she had the twins, who were as rambunctious as the Stark children before her, their grandfather and great-uncles. Jon was like this with her siblings. The sight was so heartening to her when she had been here. A merry laugh left Ned's lips. Oh, yes. He, Robb, Bran, and even Arya would scuffle every chance they got, joined at the hip, whenever my wife wasn't around. A great sorrow crossed his features. My second greatest regret. I failed, and as a result, Jon suffered. Tears welled in Dany's eyes, remembering all of it. How Catelyn Stark had shunned him, caused many in Winterfell to do the same. How, in an attempt to please her mother, Sansa would ignore Jon, even though brother and sister truly did love and care for each other. It broke her heart, and apparently it broke Lord Stark's as well. I told her the truth, he mused cryptically. But it was too late to help Jon in that way. Dany looked at him. Told her about what? Ned's emotional smile returned as a girl rode into the castle astride a horse. Face fair, figure slender, features stunning, and hair wild and fierce. A veritable she-wolf. Dany stared at her. Her features were so much like Jon, a female version. About her son. Before Dany could reply, Ned turned to her. Do not be sad, sweet Daenerys. You aren't as alone as you think. Whiteness enveloped everything around her. Eyes flying open, Daenerys attempted to shoot upright, but was stopped by a stinging pain in her abdomen. Ah! She winced. A comforting hand was placed on her shoulder. Calm down, Your Grace. Dany looked up to see Missandei sitting next to the bed, watching over her. You have to take it easy. Where? Both the vivid dream and a general fatigue was dulling her senses. What happened? You are in your chambers, Your Grace. The Sons of the Harpy launched a revolt, killing many and burning parts of the city, but it was put down by the auxiliaries. Missandei placed a wet rag on her forehead. It felt amazing to the touch. Dany swallowed, trying to eliminate the foul taste in her throat. Who was injured? A flash of hurt passed across Missandei's eyes. Grey Worm was badly wounded, and is bedridden. Dario's head was bashed on a wall, and he hasn't awoken. You took several gashes to the limbs and torso, but the Maesters haven't seen any signs of internal bleeding or infection. She brought the silver-haired queen a goblet of water, which Dany gladly drank. It was at that moment that she noticed a tight weight on her sides. Pulling back the covers, She saw two little forms curled up on either side of her. They could not sleep without knowing their mother was all right, Missandei told her with a small smile. As soon as the maester said she was stable, I brought them in to see you. Thank you, Missandei. With a love in her eyes, she gently stroked Arya's silver hair. Her children, all 5 of them, were what mattered most to her, along with Jon and the throne. They were the closest things she could have to love, and she loved and treasured them more than anything. You aren't as alone as you think. Laying back, Dany pondered what Ned Stark meant by that. Did he mean the children? And who was that girl's son? She knew that Ned Stark had a sister, but she was the one her brother had kidnapped, so it couldn't be her. Fatigue overcame her. Dany closed her eyes. The pondering could come later. You do drive a hard bargain, Lord Commander Snow, the old woman remarked, cane clacking against the worn wood of the battlements. Jon couldn't help but give a modest ghost of a smirk. It wasn't easy going. Going up against the Queen of Thorns, after all. But I am glad that you see fit to assist in this important adventure for the entire realm. Olenna Tyrell huffed. Bringing wildlings south of the wall, amassing army of corpses led by genocidal ice monsters. Personally, I think you are insane, Jon Snow, but I am in no position to judge what you will use my fleet for. Just bring it back. She turned and jabbed a sharp nail into his chest. I plan to, Jon replied. He looked behind the elder matriarch to the young Rose, bowing slightly. Lady Marjorie, I am sure you are quite tired from your long journey. Allow Lord Stark to escort you to your chambers. They aren't up to your standards, I am sure, but it is the best we could do. Smiling at Jon, Marjorie shook her head. It isn't a problem. Her eyes flickered to Robb and then to the floor. Are you sure you don't need rest, Grandmother? Nonsense. This one here still needs to show me the Tarly boy. No one is conducting any naval planning sessions with Sir Davos without me being there. The determined scowl of a woman 40 years junior, Jon found himself nearly being dragged towards the meeting hall. Now it was only the 2 of them, the fallen young wolf and the wilting rose of Highgarden, close to falling. I guess I'll bring you to your chambers, Robb finally said quietly, exhaling deeply. This wasn't like the famed young wolf, terror on the battlefield. But with all that had happened, especially between the 2 of them, he couldn't help it. You're your father's son. Yes, that would be best. The 2 walked side by side, not a word shared between them for interminable seconds. I am sorry for your wife, Marjorie offered. The phrase should pay for what they did. Aye, Robb ground out, suppressing his grief. His time to mourn her had been in the days following his arrival to Castle Black. Both on his journey north and in the coming months, Robb knew he couldn't afford to. And now she is here. The Tyrell Rose had only gotten more beautiful in the years that passed, and the night they spent together was one of the few good memories of the years since his father left for King's Landing. Despite his brooding exterior, in ways worse and a ways better than Jon Snow, brothers but so different, and general gloom, Robb had only grown more handsome to the southern beauty. Reaching an unremarkable wooden door, Marjorie gathered these were her quarters. Thank you for the escort, Lord Stark. She looked him in the eye. If you need to talk, a widower to a widow, I am always here. Leaning up on her tiptoes, she pecked his rough cheek and disappeared inside. Rubbing the spot with his fingers, Robb felt that unfamiliar spark, the one even Talisa couldn't get out of him. To say that Cersei Lannister had been in range that both Tyrion and Catelyn Stark had vanished would be an understatement. Jaime cringed at the memory of her piercing shriek, one that broke glass and was joined with the near destruction of her furniture. The bedroom Cersei had slept in had once been the Mad King's study, and her brother could only speculate that the Targaryen madness might have been spiritually rubbing off on his sister and lover. Tywin was just as mad, but he was more self-controlled about it. However, the only true madness ripping through King's Landing was that of the king. His Most Holy Highness, Joffrey, Jaime's own son, though no one left alive besides he, Cersei, and perhaps Tyrion knew that. Ever since the Red Woman had disappeared. Hells, if Jaime knew what she had mattered to either Joffrey or his father, the only two that really dealt with her. Joffrey had been distant, sequestered in his suite of rooms for the most of the time. More and more young female servants were forced into his employ, and he had spent much of his private discussions with a disgraced maester named Qyburn and a former aristocrat turned prolaizer, calling himself the High Sparrow. Qyburn was also chummy with Cersei, but the High Sparrow often spent hours talking with Joffrey. About what, Jaime didn't know, but he had an inkling that certain edicts, such as having everyone not within the Sovereign Guard or the Small Council to prostrate themselves to the king, were ideas of the High Sparrow. It was all eerily like the last days of the Mad King. Though Jaime doubted he could raise a sword against his own son, Cersei would never forgive him. A hand then gripped his shoulder, causing him to jerk back and half-draw his sword. "I wouldn't do that if I were you, Sir Jaime," growled Meryn Trant, sword already menacingly out. "Damn it!" Jaime thought with a scowl. He would have to double his retraining with Bronn. "What do you want, slug?" The sadistic freak only grunted. "The Queen Mother wishes you to come to her chambers. Alone." Narrowing his eyes, Jaime could only nod and pushed it past the guard. He could damn well find his way to his sister's chambers. He was intimately aware of it and its location, after all. Closing the door to the room behind him, making sure it was latched tight, Jaime found Cersei tucked into a rocking chair near the window. The same chair she had used to rock her children, their children, when they were mere babes. A forlorn look had planted itself on her face, blank eyes staring at the window. "Sister, sweet?" Jaime was by her side, kneeling so he could meet her face to face. "We need to secure ourselves, brother," she said, a voice flat and distant, her fair, well-defined features now directed at him. "Our son is a great man, Jaime. You have to know that." He had his doubts, but he would never voice them. "Of course he is, Cersei." "All of this is caused by the advisors." Her voice morphed into vitriol, something Jaime had seen slowly consuming her even before her marriage to Robert Baratheon. Only when they were together was she her old vibrant self, but that was even rarer since the day in Winterfell Tower. "Baelish! The High Sparrow! Our own deformed beast of a brother!" she spat. "Qyburn is decent, but Joffrey will only be safe from his own mind if he has his family. You, me, father, his siblings." She was clinging on to hope. Something Jaime didn't really have when it came to their son. Containing the damage seemed the best avenue. But if Cersei could be right, he was willing to take the chance. Suddenly growing more serious, Cersei hugged him tightly. "Bring our daughter back to us, Jaime. Make our family whole again." The Kingslayer used his good arm to match her embrace. Whatever it took, just for a little while, to forget that she just asked him to declare war on Dorne. And this was more like it. The entire Brotherhood, not on sentry duty along the wall, had been gathered in the Great Hall, making a raucous northern feast look like a garden party in the Reach. All that was missing were women and the drunken bars. "Brothers?" he attempted, but the drunken yelling and shouting was too loud. Jon turned to Ollie and nodded. As his father's pages had done during meetings at Winterfell, the young boy smacked the stone with a long stick, cracks echoing through the hall. It got quiet very fast. "Good." Jon grinned. "Now I have your attention." He brought his hands together, looking over all of the men. Like both his father and his predecessor, Jeor Mormont, he sought to be the fair leader, but with a spine of steel. "Let's bring this meeting to order." Almost immediately, Janos Slynt shot up. Lord Commander, he spat as if hating referring to Jon in that matter. I must demand you cast out the defeated pretender from Castle Black. He pointed directly at Robb, who was sat next to Sam and Tarly. And the woman traitors! Neither Marjorie nor Olenna were present at this meeting, but were new residents of the castle. They do not belong here. Oh, shut up, coward, heckled Gren, smacking his cup on the table. I wasn't the one who hid in the woods while we took down the deserters. Say that to my face, swine! Janos Slint shouted, having to be held back by Thorne. Jon rolled his eyes. The Morin probably counted on someone to stop the fight, so he wouldn't have to. More banging on the stone by Ollie ended the shouting match back and forth once more. Enough! No one is being forced out as long as I am Lord Commander. Not at the behest of the unlawful Warden of the North, or where the Tyrells have given us leave of their fleet. He and Robb shared a nod. For what reason do we need a fleet? Asked Thorne. Unlike his allies, he had some sense of civility, hence why Jon had appointed him first ranger. That and his experience at fighting. With the old bear dead, he was literally the best out of all of them. He was obedient and respectful. For now at least. After this? Leaning forward, Jon looked across the entire room. Only a few knew of what he had planned. Ollie had been the hardest to convince. And while he was still loyal, he was sceptical. And Jon knew what would happen. As he finished, the chaos began. Over half the Night's Watch were enraged. We let them through our gates? The gates we have defended for thousands of years? Asked one incredulously. Jon recognised him as one of his supporters. That just set out another back and forth among the men. Listen to me! Up rose the young wolf, resolute in support of his brother. There is no more honourable man than Jon Snow. If he says this is a threat to the world, then we must believe him. For thousands of years, opined Thorne. We have fought the wildlings. They have killed us, burnt our villages, and we have burnt theirs. Finn stood up. I will follow you to the death. You know that. But is there another way? Sighing, Jon looked his friend in the eye. We can either live with the wildlings, or add them to the army of the dead. More murmurs broke out, some starting to come around. The Night's Watch had seen many miraculous things north of the wall. Couldn't White Walkers be among them? There is no argument here. Those are my orders. He turned to Slint. Sir Janos, I want you to take over the grounds of Eastwatch. The bald visage of the former garrison commander visibly bulked. But that place is deserted. No one's bothered to exist there until the Southerners set anchor. Aye, best patch it up as you can. If we are to use it as an anchorage, it has to be well fortified as Castle Black is. Take the chief builder and 10 of his men with you. A sneer formed on his face. I was charged with the defence of King's Landing since before you soiled your swaddling clothes, bastard. He spat. Take your damn Eastwatch. Send one of the mad fools who cast a stone for you. Grumbles and jeers came from the others. Rumour has it, Robb stated glibly, that while Renly Baratheon attacked from Blackwater Bay, you were hidden in the wine cellars of the Red Keep. Another round of jeers was sent at Janos Slintz's expense, while he got as red as a ripe tomato, enraged. Wishing he could laugh, Jon had to remain aloof at a time like this. That is enough, Lord Stark. His eyes narrowed, centering on Slint. That was not a request. That was, and is, an order. Gather your belongings and ride for Eastwatch. Now. Face contorted in revulsion, Slint shot out from his bench. Fuck you, bastard! A defiant finger stabbed at him again and again. I am not going to freeze my balls off for you, your defeated shit of a brother, or the damn Tyrell bitches. So all of you can betray us to bring the wildling scum south of the wall. I will not have it. So, you refuse to obey my order? Take your order, Janos hissed slowly, and shove it up your bastard son of a traitor's ass. Sensing Rob's hands balling into fists, Jon felt his own wave of anger build up. A deathly, icy calm descended over Jon Snow. He knew what he had to do. Pip, Rob, Finn, take Janos outside. Ollie, fetch my sword. The boy nodded as Jon stood. Come to me, he shouted in his mind. While Sam had his theories, Jon still had no clue why he had such a connection. But if he was going to ask his men to do what had to be unthinkable for the Night's Watch, he would show them that he was no ordinary Lord Commander, and this was no ordinary time. Come to me, but do not hurt anyone. He couldn't help but smirk for a split second. Just act scary. That was mental, by the way. Pip and Finn hauled Slint out of his seat, who writhed and yelled in protest. When he almost escaped, Rob slammed his fist into Slint's side, not stopping at the yelling or writhing, but lessening it. Thorn stood menacingly in the way of the door as Rob, Pip and Finn followed the still squirming Slint. A tense standoff ensued, the young wolf locking eyes with the lead ranger. Unluckily for Slint, Thorn stood aside and allowed them to pass. He won't dare touch me! I am not afraid! Slint screamed, but Jon ignored him. Eyes flickering across the grounds of the castle. Men were milling about, his loyal soldiers setting up the chopping block for the coming punishment. Above, on the banister, stood Olenna Tyrell, Marjorie Tyrell, Tormund and Sir Davos Seaworth. A capable man, Davos, Jon could tell. And there was the Red Witch. She gave him the chills. The way she could see directly through him. But Jon couldn't think about that, his connection growing stronger and stronger by the second. What was a low murmuring among the milling crowd of the Night's Watch turned into a stunned silence as a loud screech was heard. A dark green shape passed overhead, bat-like wings spread far across. Jon smiled as Rhaegar landed in the middle of the castle grounds, letting out his high-pierced, adolescent shriek to the heavens. Hardened brothers of the Black found fear etched into their faces, the tough-minded Tyrells and Sir Davos gaping. Even those who knew about him were knocked back, Rob and Sam flinching automatically. Only Jon stood firm, and the Red Witch. Walking up to Rhaegar, to the shocked men's surprise, the dragon merely snorted and lowered his head submissively. Putting his hand on the scaly snout, Jon rubbed up and down. Rhaegar, stand down. The green dragon roared, but drew back, menacingly waiting right next to the platform. Good boy. Running up the steps, as satisfactory as it would be to burn Slint alive, he couldn't. He who passes the sentence must swing the sword. Jon was his father's son. As he passed Rob, he knew his brother understood. Grabbing Longclaw from Ollie, he drew it from its scabbard and handed it back to the boy. Now Janos was shaking. Jon could smell piss from his direction. He was even more pitiable. If you want and have any last words, say them now. Fear all over his face, Slint was begging. I'll do what you want. You are my commander. I was wrong. Jon raised the sword, but then he cried, Mercy! The blade halted in the air. I'm afraid. Please, I've always been afraid. Barely a moment passed before Longclaw claimed yet another kill. Rhaegar raised his neck in the air in a ear-piercing roar. Wings billowed. He ascended into the sky, leaving a stunned courtyard in his wake. Watching as Janos Slint's head rolled away, Jon turned to the rest of his command. Anyone else not willing to obey my orders? There was silence. Good. Then let's get the operation going. Feeling a hand on his shoulder, Jon faced Rob. His brother offered him a smile. You made father proud, Jon. Nodding, Jon turned slightly to the banister. He could swear that Melisandre had a triumphant expression. Looking away, Aemon Targaryen had a tear in his eye. There wasn't a day that went by where the old maester didn't marvel at the fact that someone so dear to him was so close, a comfort to his aging soul, driving his will to live. But what use was it? Did he deserve to know the truth? He was certainly old enough, and could be counted to keep it a secret. But with that news that was dripping in from Westerosi, the Targaryen name was being established once more. Most of all, he wanted his family back. A sigh leaving his lips, Aemon ducked back into his room. A dragon! A fucking dragon! Snow could have burned us all. He could have burned poor Janos. What the fuck do we do? What the fuck do we do? Shut up, all of you. Alistair Thorne felt a persistent throbbing in his head. It had appeared ever since Jon Snow's voted Lord Commander over him, thanks to the deciding vote of that old bastard Aemon. But this latest development only made it worse. This changes everything, and yet changes nothing. We cannot go forward now he has a dragon, Alistair. Thorne wanted to strangle the man for his stupidity. This only makes it more important. But we will wait. The dragon won't be close forever. The other men nodded. Your Grace, a group of travellers from Westeros seeks an audience with you. A group from Westeros? Dany shared a raised eyebrow with Missandei, who merely shrugged, and with Sir Barristan, who nodded. What are their names? One of them is Tyrion Lannister, Your Grace, travelling with Lord Varys of King's Landing. At the name Lannister, Dany tensed up. The same Lannisters that joined Robert the Usurper, that currently ruled Westeros, the ones that killed her niece and nephew. Lord Varys bears a letter from Illyrio of Pentos, attesting to his harmlessness and trustworthiness. Bring me that letter. Taking it out from the Chamberlain's hands, Dany recognised the writing as Illyrio's. Is that all of them? She gasped with a groan. Despite a dose of milk of the poppy, not enough to make her groggy, but enough to dull the pain, her tightly bandaged wounds still ached, especially when she moved. Daenerys always believed that her throne had to be uncomfortable to remind the ruler that to rule is not for their personal glory. Yet that made sure she had to resist the urge to groan and curl up into a ball due to the pain. What the Chamberlain answered made her tense even more, blood racing through her veins. They travel with a Lady Catelyn Stark and her son, Your Grace. Catelyn Stark would only abuse a small boy that did nothing to her. The father of my children. Dany spat. The image of Jon in the training yard ground. A withering glare beating him down like a dog only fueled her hate. Barristan was shocked by her vitriol. I assure you, Your Grace, you must be mistaken. I would never imagine she would be a cruel woman. Dany knew he was wrong, even if he didn't know it himself. Her mind raced with the ways that she could bring revenge on Jon's childhood tormentor, from throwing her in the dungeons or feeding her to her dragons. But she could almost see Jon's sad face, the honourable man she loved silently beseeching her not to give in to her dishonourable instincts. Sighing, she waved Barristan back and straightened her posture, oozing regal bearing. Send them in. Presenting, the Chamberlain announced, Tyrion Lannister, a shaggy-haired dwarf with an intelligent, mischievous twinkle in his eyes. Lord Varys, Master of Whisperers. A bold, rotund man with an expressionless mask. Brandon Stark, a young, crippled boy. The Lady Mira Reed, a young, pretty girl, but in a hardened way. And the Lady Catelyn Stark of House Tully and House Stark, Lady of Winterfell. She was still a comely older woman, but clearly fatigued and spiritually exhausted. The wars had not been good to her. Not exactly the monster that she had morphed into in Dany's memories of Winterfell. There are others, but they weren't deemed important. A wave of her hand shut them up. Greetings, Missandei stated. You are in the presence of Daenerys Stormborn of House Targaryen, rightful queen of the Andals, the Rhoynar, and the First Men, mother of dragons, breaker of chains, Khaleesi of the Great Grass Sea, the Unburnt, and protector of the realm. The list of titles always wowed the weak-minded, and based on their reactions, none were such. State your business. Catelyn Stark's eyes met Dany's, and both knew at that moment that the younger queen knew everything. Your Grace, she said, curtsying, my son, myself, Lord Tyrion and Lord Varys request asylum in Meereen. I am well aware of what loyalty Illyrio Mopatis gave to me. The silver-haired queen allowed after each of the three pleaded their cases. But that doesn't render my consideration of any of you less sceptical. Lannister, or you, Lord Varys. Both of you served the usurper and his son with distinction. Unable to help himself, Tyrion laughed. An eyebrow rose on Dany's forehead as the others looked at him with horror. If by with distinction, your grace, you mean to the point he was ready to execute us, then you would be correct. He may have been a Lannister, but she liked his spunk. What my companion meant to say, your grace, interjected Varys, is that we are not trusted by Joffrey the Mad because of our actions. None of us want him on the throne, and only ask for the chance to prove ourselves worthy supporters of the Targaryen dynasty, as the esteemed Illyrio believes us to be. Closing her eyes and letting out a deep breath, much as Balerion or Edaron would do, calming and menacing, before the violet orbs zeroed in on their guests. If you do prove yourselves loyal, especially you, Lannister, then you will be great assets to me. Therefore, you will be given quarters inside the pyramid. My Unsullied will show you to your quarters. The gaze softened at the young boy. His features were pure stark, tugging at her heartstrings. But then she shifted to his mother, and the lack of emotion returned. An anger, deep, stemming from where she had witnessed so long ago. As they were about to be led out by the Unsullied guards, mere escorts after all, Dany stood. Lady Stark. The woman turned, visibly tensing at her voice. The Queen of Meereen may have been the mother of dragons, but her voice was searing ice. Come to my solar. I have another matter I need to discuss with you. End of chapter. Hi guys, hope you enjoyed this. Ooh, Jon starting to let out his inner dragon a bit more. Thorne, what are you up to? And Catelyn realising that Dany knows how badly she treated Jon. Ooh. Brace yourselves, people. And also, I like, as I've said before, Robb and Marjorie. I like it. I genuinely do. I wasn't able to write much of, well, at least say most of their interactions beforehand because, again, I'm not very comfortable with the sexual scenes. And you might have not noticed it, but I glossed over a bit with Jaime and Cersei there. Again, incest, if it is distant, I normally can handle it as a plot point. And I can for Jaime and Cersei, but I do not want to read about graphic sex between twins. Thank you very much. My brain cannot take it. Anyway, sorry, I ranted there. Well, I ranted for over half an hour. Have a good day, night, or whatever time zone you're in. Bye, my guys, gals, and non-binary pals. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe, and hit that bell to get notified whenever I upload a new video. Remember to check me out on Twitter as well. Bye!